Hello, and welcome to Conversations with Matt. Previously, we saw that honor is a claim to worth that is socially acknowledged. And honor is inherited from parents, maintained by fulfilling one's prescribed role in society, and earned or lost through challenge and response. In this episode, we're going to look at honor applied to the family. Now remember, when we talked a while back, we looked at how people saw themselves. In the modern West, we said, I am who I am, or I am the sum of what I have done and what I can do. We talked about this in relation to one's LinkedIn profile, and the way we put ours together is mostly about experience and education. In an honor and shame culture, we would say, I am who I am and with whom I associate. And your family tree would be the first and most important part of your LinkedIn profile. Who you come from and who you associate with are critical. Now, in an honor and shame culture, not only is connection with people important, but how close a person to you is also important. So think of a bunch of circles. A small one inside of a bigger one, inside of a bigger one, inside of a bigger one, and so on. In an honor and shame culture, you and your immediate family are in the inside circle. The next one out has your extended family. The next one out has people who are part of optional groups. Optional groups are people you have a contract with, groups you could join, like the Pharisees or a trade guild. It's something that you had the option of joining, but it's not something you were required to do. Then the circle outside of that would have people of the same nationality, and outside of that would have outsiders. So loyalty is determined by closeness. The closer the circle is to you being in the center, the more loyal to that person you would have to be. This is something that's actually not that unfamiliar to many of us today. So let's say you were having an argument with your brother, and both of you are super mad at each other. And while you're in the middle of your argument, an outsider comes up and accuses your brother of something. The fact that the two of you were in the middle of an argument would be completely irrelevant. You two would stop your argument and team up against the outsider, and then when he was dealt with, you would get back to your own argument. In other words, no one gets to mess with my brother but me. This would hold true for all relations. You would side with a cousin over someone from a group you were in. You would side with someone in a group you're in over someone who was merely the same nationality as you. And you would side with someone who was the same nationality as you over someone who was from another country. You see how this works? The closer a person is to you, the more important your relationship is with them, and you would tend to side with that person no matter what. This is very much like people's idea today of blood relatives versus people who marry into the family. Blood ranks over everything else, and you're expected to side with the people closest to you. That's the idea anyway. There is a ranking system essentially on how close you are to somebody. The only difference is that while some of us today consider it to be somewhat important, in an honor and shame culture, this was extremely important. There is an application to this that we need to address. Basically, because of this whole idea of the circle within a circle within a circle, and that your family is the closest one to you, that means that you and your immediate family are all in the same boat. And by immediate family, I'm talking about like parents, siblings, and children. Your second cousin twice removed? Not so much. Now, an immediate family member's honor could not be lost. So you can't consider them to be dishonorable without hurting yourself. Remember, you're all in the same boat. So in other words, you could never treat your parent, your sibling, your child as somebody without honor, because you're all in the same boat. Honor battles, therefore, did not exist between immediate family members. So think about the commandment to honor your father and mother, one of the 10 commandments. This was a commandment about keeping the family unit stable. To dishonor your parents would basically be to drill holes in the bottom of the boat you were all in while you're out in the middle of the ocean. It's stupid. not only is it harmful to yourself, it's going to harm those around you, who incidentally are the only group who is certain to have your back. Now, this, I think, helps to give us background to understand one of the more difficult passages for us modern Westerners to get in the Old Testament. In Deuteronomy 21, we find this: "If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son, who will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and though they discipline him, will not listen to them, then his father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his city at the gate of the place where he lives. And they shall say to the elders of his city, This our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all of the men of the city shall stone him to death with stones. So you shall purge the evil from your midst, and all Israel shall hear and fear." In this passage, we see a disobedient son killed. And this was something that really makes very little sense to us now. It's like, what? So your children just don't listen to you, so you kill them? It's a bit different than that. Remember everything that we're talking about the boat. This disobedient son passage is a violation of the commandment to honor your father and mother. So what the son was doing was destroying the reputation of the family in the present. Probably it would also destroy the family in actuality in the future, especially if the son were the firstborn and new head of the family. So this was not a mere disobedient son as we think about it. This was a son who was threatening to bring down the whole family and would sink the whole ship. Notice also that it says that the men of the city shall stone him. It's not just the family. It's not just the father and mother saying, our kid is disobedient and we don't like him anymore and we want to get rid of him. This is a family issue and this is a city issue. You're talking about upsetting the entire structure, not only of the family, but within the city. Now that we understand how the family was structured, and we understand how important it is to maintain these close relations with the people who were your immediate family, we need to take a look at something that Jesus did. In Mark chapter 3, we find this, starting at verse 31. "And his mother and brothers came, and standing outside they sent to him and called him. And a crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, Your mother and your brothers are outside seeking you. And he answered them, Who are my mother and my brothers? And looking about at those who sat around him, he said, Here are my mother and brothers. For whoever does the will of God, he is my brother and sister and mother." With this statement, Jesus redrew the circles we just talked about. He basically took an optional group and elevated it to be more important than the family. Jesus' reordering of priorities would have been extremely disruptive. So now strangers that you just met, strangers who follow Jesus, so part of the optional group of Christians, would have a greater claim to your loyalty than your own family. And I'm sure a whole lot of people thought he was acting a bit like the disobedient son and destroying the fabric, not just of his family, not just of his city, but of the whole nation and religion because so many people were following him. He wasn't just drilling a hole in his own boat, he was drilling a hole in everybody's boats. So with what you've learned about honor and shame culture so far, how do you think this went over? Is it any wonder that some people hated him? When you combine this with winning the honor battle with the religious leaders, it's no wonder that he got himself crucified. The wonder is really that he lived as long as he did. Probably somebody would have done something sooner, but the things that he was doing that many considered to be miracles gave them pause. You can picture a sort of a conversation that went back and forth. The first person is like, Jesus is messing with everything. We can't let this continue. Another person would be like, yes, but Jesus is from God. Look at all the miracles he's doing. Yeah, well, if he were really from God, then he wouldn't be changing things that God set up. Remember? Honor your father and mother. Family comes first. Yes, but if God set things up, then he has the right to change them. No one can make blind men see, lame men walk, and raise men from the dead unless God allows it. God must be behind this. you see the sort of issue that people would be having. Jesus was really messing with the structure of how everybody's lives were set up. And yet at the same time, he was also doing things that a lot of people consider to be miracles. So what do you do with him? From what we can tell, these sorts of conversations were happening a lot. No one really knew what to do with Jesus. The one thing everyone agreed on was that he was changing everything around. The only question was this a good thing or not? Was Jesus really from God? We're going to stop here for today. We've got one more lesson left in this series. In the next episode, we're going to take a look at how honor and shame apply to outsiders. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to this podcast so that you can keep up with this, the last episode in this series as well as the series that are to come. Also, if you wouldn't mind, please write a review on iTunes and share what you think so that others know whether this podcast is for them or not. Or if you don't have time to write a review, please rate the podcast. So join me next time for the final episode in the series where we take a look at how honor and shame apply not to the family, but to outsiders.